Welcome to Talking Giants player profiles and projections, and today we are starting off with a free agent signing from the Indianapolis Colts, wide receiver Parris Campbell, who's 6 foot, 208 pounds, 26 years old. Signed a one-year deal up to $6.7 million with $3 million guaranteed, and it truly is. I mean, it's filled with incentives. And last year was his only year playing a full season, and he produced pretty well. Wasn't producing top of the league, but produced pretty well. If he were to produce the same stats as last year, it would be a one-year, $5 million deal. So I would take that it's going to be on the under on that with the way that the wide receiver room is going to go. Maybe some will hit, but I think less total because he was kind of, he was featured a lot in that quick game Colts bad offense, but I think there's going to be a lot more mouths to feed in this Giants offense. But this was one that excited me because I remember in the 2019 draft, and especially like going through Haskins tape, and I fell in love with Parris Campbell. And just as a fan of football through his first three seasons, it was very frustrating to watch him miss game after game after game. He missed 34 of 49 games his first three seasons after being a second-round pick before playing 17 last year.
53% of the games that he's played in his career came from 2022.
Yeah, more than half of his games played were from last season, in which he had 63 catches, 623 yards, 3 touchdowns on a 69% catch rate. All with the worst quarterback situation in the NFL last year. So I'm excited for him. We're watching him in training camp to start. He's being featured a good amount, probably the most targeted wide receiver. I think this guy may not have the same speed that he did coming out of college because of the injuries, but someone who should be a really exciting fit with Brian Daboll and Mike Kafka.
And still a major upgrade speed-wise to the Giants roster compared to these last few years anyway, even if he doesn't have the same speed as the Ohio State days. A lot of people have been getting excited about, this is a guy with explosive play potential, and I agree. I think you'll see him targeted down the field a little bit, but if Parris Campbell is going to be an explosive play guy for the Giants, it's going to be because he's catching the ball underneath and that he's getting yards after the catch, which I do think.
Which is what he did at Ohio State.
Right. And I do think even successful. Some of the games that I've watched with the Colts, he seems to have a great feel for when to turn up the field when he's near the sideline instead of just going out of bounds, kind of turning it upfield, going towards midfield. So many guys, how times do you see guys just sprint to the sideline? They maybe leave yards after the catch onto the field. Excited to see what Campbell can do with the ball in his hands, and he does get good separation. Even last year, with that kind of suspect offense. I have the numbers of separation right here.
I think
11th in the NFL.
Yeah, 11th in NFL Next Gen. I do think he's going to be used a lot in the yak game, and I want to compare him to Darius Slayton because Parris Campbell I think is the best yak player on this team, not named Wan'Dale Robinson.
Right.
But last year he was 40th in yak per reception. Now I guess the more targets you get, the more targets you have, the more you are. But Darius Slayton, who never was one of the worst in yak per reception. He was
one of the worst in the NFL at yak, and last year Slayton was a plus.
9th in the NFL last year. So I think getting out of that Colts offense is really going to help him. And we've just, they've used him in some gadget plays, speed sweeps, and we've seen him do that. And even at camp so far with him, we've seen him lining up in the backfield. They're really going to line him up in the backfield and not motioning in and he's running across the formation. No, they'll literally just line him up next to the quarterback, no motion, sits there, and then he'll run a route going from there.
Yeah, I don't think Parris Campbell's season, it's going to be fun to see him in those roles, but maybe you'll see that 1 to 2 times a game. But where I think you're going to have Parris Campbell that will be the main decider of him having a good year with the Giants or a bad year or kind of an indifferent year is what he does when he's targeted between that 0 to 9 yard range. So I took a look at Parris Campbell yards per route run ranking within 0 to 9 yards, minimum of 45 targets. Richie James was 9th. Hey, we recognized last year that it was Daniel Jones that was really accurate with the ball, really taking advantage of the Brian Daboll, Mike Kafka offense, and even Parris Campbell in an offense that wasn't that great last year with bad quarterback play. He was 14th. He wasn't far behind Richie James in the yards per route run category, but within 0 to 9 yards. I think the quick timing routes will help on early downs, especially with the mentality that the Giants had towards the last quarter of the season, and that even on third downs, that's early downs. Third downs, I think the curls and selling routes vertically, but then even coming back and kind of turning around. I think Parris Campbell did that very well, kind of selling routes vertically. And if the Giants are running those deep curls, I think Parris Campbell can really fit there on third down.
And it's a weird fit for Parris Campbell because Parris Campbell is going to be used most primarily in the slot. Now, I think there is outside value to him. I actually think his route running shows off more on the outside when he's able to use that speed and sell vertical and work leverage more. Where I think in the versus man coverage in the slot, I think that's where he struggles because there is some rawness to his route running through all these years. But in the slot, like versus zone, I mean, what did he have? He had he was the sixth highest catch rate versus zone last year, 40th versus man. So you see the difference there. Why is that though? I think it's because he needs work tempoing his releases and using cell to separate versus man in the quick game. And then versus zone, he's just so quick. And Indy, they got the ball out quick because they had Matt Ryan as their quarterback, that they would get the ball to him quick, and that's why he's had success there. I think he's going to play more in the slot, but you also are going to I see some big plays. Like Richie James was the slot receiver last year. And even Wandale, you can't put him out on the outside and run him on a post.
Right.
You can't put him on an outside and put him on an 18-yard comeback. Parris Campbell, you can. There is that flexibility there, and he can create. Yeah, it's not even just the size. It's just he's got that speed with a little bit of size. To where I think he's a smart guy, and they are truly going to work to use him a ton. Like I'm excited to see Parris Campbell. If he is the leader in receptions and yards, I don't think, at least for the wide receivers, I don't think anyone is shocked.
Right. One more stat I want to bring up, and then we'll get to a little bit of a projection question. 40% of his targets last year came from the short center and intermediate center part of the field. And something that was missing from this Giants offense last year was utilizing the middle of the field, basically almost at all levels. Everything was so much centered towards the sideline. Hey, Daniel Jones rolling out, the play action rollouts and those boots. You're not typically throwing the ball back towards the middle of the field and those towards the middle of the field. You're throwing towards the sideline, and the Giants really didn't utilize the middle part of the field. So I think Parris Campbell will hopefully be part of that answer, that we can get more versatile in terms of Daniel Jones' spray chart and where we're targeting across the field. So here's my question to you. As we heard, the beat has hyped up Parris Campbell in the spring, and then I think that's followed with, fans see the highlights of Parris Campbell from the Colts, and even hearing the reports from the spring, there are a lot of people very excited about Parris Campbell. And I've gotten more excited as other people have gotten excited. Do we think that fans and maybe us, we are overhyping Parris Campbell a little bit?
Yes, a little bit. And also, because he played 17 games last year, I'm still worried about injuries with him. I mean, in 2021, he had a foot sprain and an ab sprain. In 2020, he had a PCL and MCL sprain. In 2019, his rookie year, he broke his foot. I'm not really worried about him breaking his foot again. But, he's missed... besides last year, he missed 34 of 49 games.
Yeah. And Dalton Feely, our guy, our Colts guy at the office, he's a Colts fan, he's a big football fan. He basically didn't have a major reaction to Campbell, getting a deal with the Giants and kind of leaving the Colts, because he just mentioned that whole thing of, 32 career games, 17 of them came in 2022, and this is his fifth year in the league.
And he needs to improve on his route running from the slot. Watch him run routes in the slot and watch Cole Beasley. There's a difference. Now, Parris Campbell has speed and things that Cole Beasley can't do, and size and ability to go on the outside, but that's where he's going to be primarily used. But you go and go watch him with some Carson Wentz with the Colts, where they played him on the outside. Because you look at his per year, last year he played 77% in the slot. In 2021, he only played 9% in the slot. The year before, 95%, and then his rookie year, 48%. So he's alternated every year from slot and outside being his primarily. I think this year it'd probably be, 68%, slot, 32% outside, or however you want to line it up. Mm-hmm. But you go watch him, some stuff with Wentz. He really uses vertical cell to influence and get open.
Yep.
There's some really good route running out there, which is that's something that speed allows you to do. Where it's if he was slower with the same ability, he's not getting open on those. But because he's able to use that vertical cell and there is a threat, you can get there. And then you remember the game versus the Giants, the only play the Colts really made was a deep post
contested
where
catch.
Parris Campbell went up and got it, when Nick Foles just threw it up to him. So there is some more ability out there. And again, you can use them in gadget plays where you weren't using that from your slot wide receiver and Richie James last year. Wandale you could, but Richie you couldn't. So
I'm going to tell you something, though.
So it's a very low risk deal, and that's why it's a low risk deal for a risky player, but also a high reward player.
Right. And I know we're running a little long. This is a luxury point, but a very specific play I want to see run with Campbell, Slayton, And hell, let's maybe even just throw Hyatt out there. And I don't know if the Giants have had the speed to do it consistently the last couple of years. And that's mesh. Ran it a little bit at Ohio State. Was seeing some highlights where that, some people were highlighting that. That's a play like with yak potential. Do you agree? Like,
Absolutely.
Hey, let's get Slayton.
It's a staple
Hyatt.
of the Giants playbook.
Love it. So yeah, I think Campbell. That's a play. If that's a staple of the Giants playbook, Campbell kind of adds that. And also, you clipped Parris Campbell up from this past offseason. I thought this answer was pretty insightful, and it's rare to hear how honest players are. This was during the spring. Campbell just turned 26, signed the one-year deal, very incentive heavy. He talked about this spring how he thought that his free agent market would be more than what it was, but then said, yeah, I kind of get it because I'm an injury-prone player. So another player on a one-year deal for the Giants who is hopefully going to be hungry this year to get more money after this year.
Yeah, and I can see him having a good season and then going and getting a bigger deal than the Giants were one they offer. Because
that's a win for the Giants.
We like you, but we want to go out and we want to develop Wandale and stuff. So it's really a nice deal to have for him. Parris Campbell was like pre-free agency. I was like, I like him, but I don't know if he's going to be a target because I think there's just too much risk with signing him. And then you look at the contract and how incentive laden it is. It's like, there's really no risk on this deal.
We also thought that the wide receiver market was going to explode, and really it didn't.
Yeah.
So,
all right, that's Parris Campbell. Now, on the defensive side, we talk about his Colts counterpart and the big splash in free agency because Darren Waller was a trade. Bobby Okereke, inside linebacker, 6'1", 240 pounds, 27 years old. The Giants, the biggest free agent signing that Joe Schoen has made in his 2 years as the Giants GM, signed him to a 4-year, $40 million contract with $22 million guaranteed. So essentially 2 years guaranteed. But I hope that he plays out this contract because that was really good value for him. Last year had 151 tackles, 6 tackles for a loss. The year before, 132 tackles, 3 tackles for loss, and 2 interceptions. A very fast and athletic, good, not great linebacker, right? And he was paid that way. Bobby Okereke is immediately a huge upgrade to the Giants. But I think there's really room for growth for him to grow as a processor with that athleticism. I remember when we talked about him when we signed him, I was like, Bobby Okereke, for most teams, you don't look at him as a defense-changing player. For the New York Giants, he is, because linebacker was their worst position on the team last season, where he is a defense-changing player because of how important he is. And obviously got paid as a good, not great linebacker. But with that speed, that athleticism, he's not the strongest guy in the world, but he's strong enough. I think if he can grow as a processor, he can really become more of a playmaker.
Yeah. My notes, fast, athletic, long, arm length in the 98th percentile with that 34.5-inch wingspan. I saw somewhere that his athletic profile is comparable to Azeez Ojulari. That's a note that I had down when we signed him as a free agent. Was tied for 16th in run stops, 21st in run stop rate this past year. And I have closing speed as like plus. I think that's going to be his biggest key, and that's going to be the way that he's going to be able to win this year. I know we're not moving to coverage yet. I'll save some of the coverage.
Yeah, we'll
stats
save coverage for the last, but the coverage is fun.
But Okereke generated 75 defensive stops in 2022. That was tied for the 10th most among all linebackers. The Giants linebackers combined for 87 defensive stops last season, 19 fewer than any other defense, which is kind of crazy, kind of wild. He has a tendency to force some fumbles. 2 forced fumbles in the open field this past year, 1 against the Giants and Darius Slayton. So let me ask you this, Bobby, just about Bobby Okereke as a player. I have 2 questions for you. Does Bobby Okereke's strengths as a player match with the weaknesses of some of the Giants linebackers from last year? And what did the Giants linebackers struggled with last year, and how is Bobby Okereke going to improve those areas?
So coverage, he's a huge upgrade. Now, the Giants struggled, where he excels is versus zone runs, and we can go like zone, then gap, and then coverage. Where he excels is zone runs. Like, go watch the Tennessee Titans versus the Colts. Like, he was laying the wood and getting run stops versus Derrick Henry because he sees it, he gets downhill quickly, and he's got that closing speed that you said. That he in zone is obviously a lot easier to read, but he gets in there and he screws up offensive lines, combo to linebacker blocks because of how fast he is. He can get low and get through creases and just wins with speed and angles. Not the greatest block shedder in the world, but he also doesn't get blown up or can't disengage from guys, and he just doesn't miss tackles. But versus gap, which is what the Giants really struggled at, he is a huge improvement because at least he's not in the wrong place, right? With Bobby Okereke versus these gap runs, he's not in the wrong spot, but he's also not going to be a big playmaker versus those runs and you see that in the low tackle for loss numbers because he's like a speck. Like he's not the greatest diagnoser of plays in the world. And that's where you see linebackers really become the great ones. Is that, man, they just know what you're doing. They know where you're running, and they are there before the offense is. And again, he's not in the wrong place in those spots, but he's not there a step or two early and blowing up those plays, and that's why he doesn't have the big high tackle for loss numbers that we see in some of the better linebackers in the NFL.
Where do runs with misdirection fall into that? Because that was a big thing the Giants struggled with last year, right?
Yeah, a gap runs. There's a lot of counters and stuff with that. Again, he's in the right place.
Yeah,
he's in the right place where our other linebackers would be go.
Yeah,
where he's like go. So
and having the athleticism, plus also I think the arm length matters, and I think having big arm, especially if you're gonna try and even just slow a guy down so the rest of the herd and the rest of the defense can get there and swarm the ball. I think that's huge, and I think that's really important. And also having the improved defensive line and the depth that we have at defensive line should hopefully make Bobby Okereke's job easier as well.
There's three things, and I know this isn't a show about how the Giants can stop the run this year. There's three things. One, the interior depth. Where last year they were putting Ryder Anderson out there and he would just get washed down by tackles. Kayvon becoming a more consistent edge setter. That can help. And then obviously Bobby Okereke is going to improve it. We can talk about him in coverage, and then we could even do a little green dot at the end. His coverage ability, to me, is really, really nice. And you see that on running backs on those flare routes. That, like, it's not the most complex thing in the world, but those choice routes can be they can get linebackers in trouble, and he is just beautiful where he just stays square, man. Like, you do not get him to sell one way and then you go the other if you're an offensive player. Where he keeps your hips squares, he's patient, and then when you make that break and you declare, he is getting in that hip and undercutting and being able to get pass breakups and get his hands on the ball, and then obviously that comes with one, reading the play and having the IQ for that, but the great speed and agility that he has. He picks up screens exceptionally well. And like versus the Giants, he was on Saquon duty that game.
Blew Saquon Barkley up.
That was when the Giants had moved towards the end of the year, where they were involving Saquon as the flat in their stick concept and trying to just get the ball in the Saquon's hand outside of handing the ball up the gut because it wasn't working at that point.
Yep. And
Saquon Barkley, who was having good receiving outputs, the few weeks before that, had 2 catches for -5 yards in that game. One was a screen, and then another like a 0-yard gain on a flat. And he was just like they were stopping from them from throwing the flat on that route, which versus the Vikings and the Commanders that they were throwing that a ton. And he was able to shut him down. So I think he's a really intelligent player. And then you in coverage, and you include that with the speed and agility. I think he's a really damn good linebacker. Like, he's a really solid linebacker. But I do want to see growth from him. He's what is he? He's 27 years old.
Yeah.
But I do want to see growth from him, especially in a Wink Martindale defense that asks you to do a lot more at the linebacker spot than your traditional defenses.
Yeah. And the Colts asked him to do a lot in coverage, where sometimes I feel like linebacker coverage numbers, we know that they're suspect. It's even like with safeties, the numbers can be a little suspect.
Especially in a Colts defense where it's like you're dropping into zone and you're letting everything go underneath.
But they asked him to do a lot, and I think that's like the point where Bobby Okereke was tested really a lot in 2022, facing the most targets of any linebacker. And I'm sure there are some people that look at that and be like, oh, if you're getting targeted, that means that the guys you're covering are open. I kind of think it's the Colts were trusting him to do a certain thing or do a certain task to stop whatever the game plan dictated that week. But Okereke held his own, and this is the number that impresses me most, and that you have to contextualize with the targets. I like minus 2.3 receptions over expected and 5.9 yards per target. That's the stuff that matters. So good on Okereke. He's good in coverage. Excited to see what he's going to do this year in blue.
Last thing. We are about a few days into camp. Green dot, Bobby Okereke or Xavier McKinney. Have you changed your opinion at all?
My opinion was Okereke, right? Yeah, and then you were McKinney.
No, I'm Okereke strongly.
Oh, you were. Oh, yeah. I think I'm Okereke strongly. Was I the other way around a couple weeks ago?
No, I think you were Okereke. I just wanted to get it on the record on his player profile
Okereke.
projection. My reasoning for that is just I want McKinney to just focus on playing his
be a
position,
playmaker.
being a playmaker.
Yeah,
and I understand. And this linebacker's not coming off the field. Where like last year, and I know Wink did it. Who was the last linebacker? I forget. I think it's C.J. Mosley was the last linebacker he had to do the green dot in Baltimore. Bobby Okereke should not be coming off the field for any. There's no package where he should be coming off the field. Not a single one. So he's always going to be on the field. He is that middle person between the first and third levels of the defense. In this, him being in the second level, I think he's an extremely intelligent player, and I want that being his role. I want him counting the number of guys on the field at one time. I don't want touchdowns given up where we have 10 guys on the field.
Yep,
so.
happen a lot.
All right, that's a player profile and projection. We'll be back tomorrow with a regular podcast. We'll see you then. Until then, let's go Big Blue.